Good afternoon, everyone, and we welcome you to our fourth Courageous Conversation. This is sponsored by South Coast Interfaith Council. I'm Pastor Jonas Hayes. I'm a board member of the South Coast Interfaith Council, as well as the senior pastor of Grace First Presbyterian Church in Long Beach. The theme this afternoon is Sacred Practices During Quarantine, Challenges and Opportunities, and we have two guests with us. In addition to our executive director of the South Coast Interfaith Council, Milia Islam-Majeed, we also have Jihad, Turk. And I will say more about them in a few moments. But first, I'd like to ask our facilitator of the technology side of things, Marietta, to share about the Zoom meeting and how we will proceed. So with that, Marietta.
Okay, I'm going to share something on the screen that might help you to remember. It's a little set of notes about some things that we found to work very well. I have everyone except the speakers on mute. So I think it works really well if we all stay muted unless you have something specific to say. You can unmute yourself. So when you need to do that, you certainly can. It works really well if we have questions, if we'll send those to Jonas via chat. And so if everyone can take a look when we get back to non-screen sharing, you might not be able to see it now. There's a chat box down at the bottom. Just click on that. You can chat to everyone, or you can chat just to Jonas Hayes, which is a really good way to do it. We may get to a time where you want to raise your hand. So there's a bit of hand raising that can happen under reactions. If you see reactions, you can raise your hand. You may need to go to manage participants to see that. If you're sharing your video with us, and I think we're almost all sharing video, it works really well if you have a light kind of shining on you and not a light shining from behind you, because that blinds everybody. So if you have a window behind you, you might want to put down the shade or draw the curtain. And let's see, we are recording this. So if anybody really has a problem with being recorded, just let us know via the chat box or a little bit later. So if you have any questions, you can certainly chat to me, Marietta. And if you have any technical problems, don't hesitate to chat to me. And I will even put my cell phone number in the chat box so you can call me if you need to call. And that's all I know.
Thank you very much, Marietta. I'll share just a little bit about our guests this afternoon. The first is Jihad Turk, and he is the founding president of Bayan Claremont Islamic Graduate School, the nation's first Muslim graduate school to offer an accredited master's degree in the fields of Islamic studies, education, chaplaincy, and leadership. Jihad previously served as Imam, Director of Religious Affairs at the Islamic Center of Southern California, LA's oldest and largest mosque. He's a sought-after national speaker on issues related to Islam, Muslims in America, Muslim reform movements, ethical leadership, and spiritual and identity formation of youth. Additionally, Jihad has committed himself to building bridges across faith communities to collaboratively address issues of homelessness and poverty. For the past 15 years, Jihad has dedicated himself to improving relations between the Muslim and Christian communities of Southern California. He's co-founder of the Greater LA Muslim Jewish Forum, which brings together major leaders of both faiths to improve relations and to address issues of common concern. Jihad is a founding board member of Muslim Jewish Peace Organization, Regeneration, which is developing a model for education that nurtures understanding and peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians. So we welcome you, Jihad, and we are so glad to have you with us. Our second guest is Executive Director of SCIC, South Coast Interfaith Council. She is the daughter of immigrant parents who migrated here in 1986 from Bangladesh. She has lived then in the U.S., spending most of her childhood and adolescence in a small Midwestern town of Fulton, Missouri. She obtained her undergraduate degree in world religions and psychology from Westminster College in Missouri, and thereafter moved to Boston for her graduate work. She's a 2004 graduate of Harvard University, where she earned her master's in theological studies and of the world religions and anthropology. She's spoken worldwide about her interfaith work, and some of her recognitions include being one of 8 national recipients of the USA Network 2010 Character Unite Awards, awarded the NAACP 2011 Woman of the Year in Long Beach, selected in 2015 as one of the future 50 emerging leaders under the age of 35 who are shaping the landscape of faith in Los Angeles by the USC Center for Religion and Civic Culture and Interreligious Council of LA. Most recently in 2017, Milia was chosen as one of 11 individuals throughout the world to be a research fellow at the Dalai Lama Center for Ethics and Transformative Values at MIT, where her research focuses on the intersection of Islam and ethics. She's the executive director of South Coast Interfaith Council, the largest and oldest interfaith council in California, serving 35 cities in Southern California. So we welcome both of you. We're so excited to have you with us. And for those of you that might be attending this for the first time, we allow about 30 or so minutes that I have some initial questions that I'll be asking our guests. And then we allow for about 15 minutes or so of Q&A questions that you might have. And then we'll do a final wrap up with announcements and dismissal. And we aim for this to last about 45 minutes just so you can plan for your time. So with that, especially Jihad and Milia, we're in this sacred month of Ramadan in the Islamic faith and tradition. And because I know that there are some on this call and part of this Zoom meeting that are familiar with Ramadan and others that might not know as much, I wonder if you might be able to share with us a little bit about what is Ramadan, but then to speak to it personally is what has Ramadan meant to you on a personal level? Not just what does it mean for the Islamic community as a whole, but what does it mean to you in your personal faith? Milia, would you begin to answer that for us?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for having this. So thank you, Jihad, for being my co-partner in this talk today. Ramadan, so essentially from a theological perspective, Ramadan is considered one of the most sacred months within the Islamic faith. Islamic faith, we operate on a lunar calendar, and the significance of Ramadan is such that the sacred text of the Quran was revealed in this month to Prophet Muhammad through Angel Gabriel from God. And so the significance of this month really, there's multiple ones, but among them are reconnection with the Quran, the concept of fasting, from sunrise to sunset, from water and from food and, really anything unethical or bad. And the core of it is really like a spiritual cleansing, because it really allows you to not just recognize the material things that we take for granted, but when you're at that state, it does have you do achieve like this kind of a deep kind of connection to the divine, because everything is kind of sucked out of you. You have no food, you have this, that. And so you'll see Muslims around the world, fasting during this month to commemorate this sacred occasion. For me personally, I think for every Muslim, probably it's like the best time of the year, right? Because it's a whole month, and a lot of times it's really just a month to kind of, we have like the normal New Year, Gregorian New Year, but then for many Muslims, this is kind of a time to, restart or recenter and, refocus ourselves and our priorities and our spirituality. And so people really look forward to it with joy. And I remember when I was little in Missouri, that we were the only Muslim family. And so I would be in school and I wouldn't eat during lunch, right? And I would still sit there with everyone, and they would just be amazed, like, oh my God, that must be so hard. And the thing is that I think with all religion, right, it's a matter of the will. and, you know, the will to do something for something or someone greater than yourself. And so, you know, really, it's not to negate the fact that, yeah, sometimes it is difficult, but, you know, there's such a purpose towards it. So really that difficulty is very minimal compared to the joy that someone gets out of it. But at the same time, I'm a very realist person. So like any faith tradition, I think it, you know, kind of gives these things for you to aspire to. And so some days are harder than other. Today, I'm extremely thirsty. I'll be very honest. I don't know what I had before I woke up, before sunrise, that's causing all this thirst. But yeah, so for me, it's just a really special time to reconnect with God, to reconnect with my faith. And under normal circumstances, or the pre-COVID normal circumstances, it was also really a beautiful time to reconnect with the community, because that's what we used to do. So anyways, Jihad, you continue. I don't want to take all the time.
What she said. Yeah, I mean, Ramadan, I always put it, I say there are 4 areas of focus for Ramadan for the community, and then I'll say my personal. It's a time of intensity, of self-discipline. So you withhold from eating or drinking for a higher purpose. But that leads you to feel empathetic for those people who might not necessarily have food and sustenance year round. And so it's a time of intense charity. People usually give all of their donations during this month, or many of them. And there's also a sharing of food with those who are in need. So you provide the breakfast meal for people who are unable to afford it, and that is considered a very beautiful form of charity during this month. And it brings everyone together. When you break bread together, you get to know one another, and that's oftentimes hosted either in people's homes or in the mosque. So that leads to the next one, which is intense community. And every night usually is filled with some social occasion, some social event, sometimes fundraisers for social justice organizations and community organizations. It's intensely social. And then lastly, there's an intensity of prayer, because as Milia said, it's a month in which the Quran was revealed. So people throughout this month recite the Quran, but as a collective activity, what's normally done is we would gather in mosques and listen to our version of a cantor, a reciter, a qari, as we would call him, recite the entirety of the Quran, 1/30th per night for 30 nights, while standing in prayer. So that takes about an hour, hour and a half each night. And that's after 15 or so hours of fasting and having a small bite. And then you stand in prayer until about 11 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, in the mosque. And then you go home, you get a few hours sleep, you wake up at 4 in the morning to get a bite to eat. So and then you start fasting around 4:40 these days. So it's an intense month of prayer and devotion and reconnecting to the Quran. For me personally, it's a time of spiritual rejuvenation and renewal. I kind of look at it as my spiritual batteries are drained throughout the year. Now they're recharged. Fortunately, we have rechargeable spiritual batteries, and Ramadan is the month we plug into to get that recharge. And so it's beautiful. And I want to anticipate where this is going, but we can talk about how things are different now in COVID. But that's usually the way it is.
That's great. I love that emphasis of thinking of fasting with joy, because I think so often it's the depiction of fasting can be a different one. I love that of looking at that experience of joy and reconnecting. Thank you so much. And even at times that I've heard a description of Ramadan, there's a lot of layers that you've added here. So I appreciate that. So a question that I'd like to ask, and mostly because the theme is sacred practices during quarantine, challenges and opportunities. So this question really comes to the heart of that theme. And I'd like to ask Jihad, if you would start on this one, as if you might answer, what are some new and emerging spiritual disciplines for you and for your faith communities during this time of pandemic?
Well, traditionally, Muslims gather for congregational prayer at the mosque. Those who are able to 5 times a day, but as a minimum, people are obligated, if you're, able to attend once a week on Fridays around midday for the Friday congregational prayer. Uh, Mosques are closed, and so the scholars of religion have been debating, like, okay, well, how can we do this? Can we do a virtual Friday sermon? Would that count? Would it not count? And so most scholars have said it does not count. However, you can still give the sermon, and then people just do a noonday prayer because they're not obligated to make the congregational prayer. So you could listen to a sermon on Friday and then do a normal noontime prayer like you would for any other day, as opposed to the shortened congregational prayer that would, some people are proposing to do virtually. So you could just do that at home with your family members or by yourself. So I guess that's something. Some people are innovating and actually performing virtual congregational prayers, and not just the sermon but the prayer itself. But that's very few people are resorting to that. The other thing is, during the month of Ramadan, um, every night, as I indicated, we gather and listen to the Quran recited and then pray in congregation for an hour and a half each night. And so what people are doing, and then part of that, usually there would be a portion where young kids would come between the ages of, let's say, like 4 and 12, and recite portions of Quran that they've memorized. And it's a celebration of the Quran, and then we would listen to the reciter, and then there would be a commentary before the Quran, or before the Quran is recited, or before the evening prayer. And so what people are doing to innovate now during COVID times is they would have the recitation of the Quran done before prayer, not during prayer, and it would be streamed live, and people would listen in, and then they would bring in a commentator. So, for example, tonight I'm going to be doing the Quranic commentary for New Horizon in Irvine, next Wednesday for the Islamic Center of Southern California, et cetera, et cetera. So, they're kind of rotating commentaries or commentators that would come in and speak to that portion, like a Torah portion, right? That Torah portion of the Quran for that night. And then even for the Islamic Center of Southern California, where I used to serve as the imam or religious director, they still have incorporated having the children recite. It's so beautiful, and really makes the evening program so special, because everyone's on Zoom, and then they schedule to unmute the family whose little daughter or son is going to recite some verses from the Quran, and they come on, and it's just so cute. And then the person who's facilitating is our local reciter, and he's a local dentist also, Dr. Saleh Khoudoui. He interacts with them. He's so jovial and funny. He's just really humorous, and the way he engages with everyone, it makes it seem like you're right there. So that's been the primary thing. And then some organizations have developed a Ramadan series that they've released, that they release nightly on YouTube and other platforms like Facebook. Bayan is a graduate school that I head up, and so we've done that. We've done aphorisms of a very famous Sufi named Ibn Ata'Allah. And so we had one of our in-house scholars do a commentary, and we release a portion of his commentary every other night. And so there are a lot of that. And then lastly, there's a lot that people have innovated, so I'm giving a drawn out answer, but we've also opened up for free a learning platform called Bayan Online that allows people to access college, graduate level courses on Islam. It's like a Netflix for Islamic studies. So people, can go to bayanonline.org, and then they can binge watch a course on Islamic spirituality, or watch it on demand. So there are those kinds of innovative approaches that people are taking during this month to still grab onto the spirit of this month and feel the recharge that they're aiming for during this month.
That's great. You know, I wonder too, I don't know if it's convenient or not, but I wouldn't mind seeing in the chat if you had a link to that place to binge watch some of that stuff. I might want to, I'd be
And
interested.
we made it free for the next 2 months because of COVID. So it's usually
Yeah.
like the month. We've opened it up for people when they're
Yeah.
stuck.
I would
I'll go ahead
love
and
to
check
see
the chat.
that. Yeah. Send the link and would love to check that out. Milia, would you answer that question and do you want me to repeat the question or have you got it? Yeah.
No, I got it. I mean, I think Jihad covered a lot of, a lot of the things that I was going to say as well. I think some of the other things, I mean, it is a challenging time in the sense that you tremendously miss this physical community, right? Seeing each other every night. It's just a different ambiance. It's a different feeling. That said, I think, everything happens for a reason. So one of the things that I'm finding personally, and I think this is echoed in my fellow Muslim friends as well, is, in the American context, the country doesn't stop for Ramadan, right? If we didn't have COVID, I would still be driving to Long Beach in the morning. I would get up at 3, what time do I get up? Yeah, I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I would eat my meal. I would do my morning prayers at, 4:48 or something like that was today. I would go to bed for maybe an hour. I would hop in the car, drive an hour to the office, do my business, the whole day meetings and things like that, come back from the office, be stuck in traffic, take but 2 hours. I live in the Inland Empire, my office is Long Beach. Sometimes it took me 2 hours. I would break my fast in the car, but then I would come and then hurry. We would go to the mosque and we'd pray the prayers. By the time we came back, it was around midnight. And then at 4 o'clock, my day would start again, right? And that was typical of most people. The world doesn't stop, particularly within the American context. So one of the things that's really interesting this year about Ramadan, in many ways, and I don't know, Jihad, I mean, it's a lot easier in the sense that I do talk a whole lot because of all these Zoom meetings, and so I tend to get a bit more thirsty. But in terms of that physical movement, because it's tiring when you're eating and drinking, and then when you're not doing that and have to engage in this. So in that case, I think in some ways, at least for me, it's been easier, right? I miss the community tremendously, but having the ability to just be at home and to do this, for me, that task in itself has become a bit easier. And I think another thing which is really beautiful is oftentimes during Ramadan, if you have kids, right, the parents usually, if they're too little, like I have a 15-month-old, and so she just runs around and throws everything on the floor. So if I take her to the mosque, sometimes it's more of a challenge than it is, something of a great experience. So a lot of times what happens is, one day the mother will go, one day the father will go, and, just be kind of divided so they still have that time in that mosque. But at this time, it's really allowing for the family unit to really embark on this sacred time together as an entity, right? And that's something also really special as well. For us, same thing as Jihad, our Chino Valley Islamic Center, they have Quran recitations, they start programs at 7 o'clock. And then you have the iftar, which is breaking of the fast, which is around 7:40. And then at 9 o'clock, again, they start recitation of the Quran and then, give lectures and things like that. So for us, that fills that void. And for some other people, like my family in Missouri, it's my mother and my father, my brother, sister-in-law, and 4 kids. So they have a big household. And for them, it's kind of interesting because Yusuf, the oldest, who's 16, he's what they call Hafiz of the Quran, meaning he has the entire Quran memorized, right? So from all 114 chapters, and so he actually leads them in the prayer. And so it's been a really special experience for him as well, kind of leading the family in these extra prayers. So those are kind of some of the ways that people are experiencing this month amidst kind of the COVID circumstance that we find ourselves in.
Thank you very much, Milia and Jihad. Milia, I've got a question directed for you specifically, and mostly because I know that your brother is a physician, and I particularly have an interest in how sometimes reconciling science and religion. I grew up in a household where we believed that science was not contrary to religion, but it just helped us to learn more about the richness of God's creation. But I wonder how your brother, as a practicing Muslim, how is he and maybe other folks in the medical community who are Muslim how are they fasting and honoring some of those traditional religious practices of Islam during this time, during this specific period of time?
Right. So within Islam, I mean, the same thing. There's very much a belief that, they go hand in hand, religion and science. It's not that one versus the other. So a couple of things on that point. So in terms of particularly like the COVID virus, right? I gave a talk a couple of weeks, 2 weeks ago about this. And, it talks about how even within the Islamic text, there's things that say, for every illness, there's a cure, like God has a cure. So your responsibility is to seek for that cure, right? So none of this kind of separation of church, of religion and science. So very much go hand in hand. That said, in regards to Ramadan, there's also it's not meant to put one in hardship. And what does that mean? So for Ramadan, for example, this is the first the last 2 Ramadans I wasn't fasting. Reason being is 2 Ramadans ago I was pregnant, and if I'd fast, it would be a harm to myself because I was growing a human being inside of me. And the subsequent Ramadan, I was feeding, I was breastfeeding her, and I couldn't do that either because I would put her, nutrition and stuff in peril if I was depriving myself of food and water. So if you're in a circumstance in which that you feel that it's truly going to hurt you, then you're actually mandated not to fast. If you're sick, if you are traveling, if you have health issues, things like that. Now with the physicians, it's interesting. There's been scholars who have said that you need not fast because especially if you are right in the front lines where you're taking care of these critical COVID patients, wearing all the PPP, attire, which is very hot, and you're thirsty. And if it's going to be a hindrance, a true hindrance in the way that you treat your patients and their well-being will be at a cost, then most physicians there, are not fasting because it would be something that's harming another person directly. Now, there are physicians who are able to do so, and they do, and that's their choice. My brother, we live in a very small town. He's a physician in Fulton. And so his, New York and Fulton are 2 very different things. So he's able to fast, and that's okay. But I have other colleagues and friends in New York who aren't because they are right in the heart of it still, right? Taking care of these patients. And they themselves feel that they can't function fully if they were to embark on fasting. So it's really, it's a matter of, faith is a balance of, belief in something divine and spiritual, and also your rationale as well. So for those who aren't fasting, you can make up those fasts later on, or you could do things where you're feeding the poor, which kind of takes place of that. So there's definitely that, that leeway that's there so that it's not something that's so black and white.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think the last question I have, and I want to make sure we have some time for other questions, is it's been really powerful for me as a pastor to hear what other congregations are doing. What are some emerging service and volunteer opportunities? I know I asked Rabbi David Cantor that question, and he said how in his church, he and his leaders called all of their church members, and he was amazed to see that not one person said that they needed something, but their first question was, what can I do to help others? And I know that's been true at the congregation that I serve at Grace First, really reaching out to do as much for the community as we can and for each other. But I wonder, in your faith communities, how has your faith community facilitated volunteer activities and service opportunities? Jihad, would you maybe share that within your community?
Yeah, so one of the first interfaith endeavors that we undertook at the Islamic Center when I came in 2005 as the imam was to join HopeNet, which is an interfaith food pantry network. And I think at that time there were about 10 or 12 faith congregations that participated, and they housed a food pantry that they would receive food from the LA Regional Food Bank, and they would distribute it to local needy families around the congregations in the Wilshire Center area of downtown Los Angeles. And There was a synagogue, a mosque, and a lot of churches. And it's grown significantly since then. And when we first started out with just a handful of people, now we have about 300 people, and the need has not diminished during COVID. And so we were able to work with the city to maintain that food pantry volunteer opportunity for our congregants by maintaining a certain number of volunteers, by having the people who line up that maintain social distancing, and we're adopting all best practices, but we're able to still volunteer for those people who are able to physically go and help volunteer. We also have a food distribution opportunity to take food to people's homes who are elderly and in need, and that's also organized through the Islamic Center. There's a friend of mine from the East Coast. He developed an app, I forget the exact name I signed up, but it's My Neighbor's Helper, I think is something like that. And his name is Shahid Amanullah. I can find the link and send it. But he, it's an app that you sign up and said, whether you need food, or whether you need help or assistance or grocery runs or whatever, or whether you can offer it. And then it matches people up by zip code and by neighborhood, and you can go and help people. So, and then of course, all of the Muslim charities that exist. I mean, we have, I think it's something like 10% of our community are in the medical profession, which is, pretty high percentage. And so many of them are involved in direct help, either through their work or through setting up networks. So I know the IMANA, the Islamic Muslim medical network in North America. They're doing a lot in terms of providing training, providing equipment, doing fundraising. Yeah. So there's so many I can't even count, but their volunteerism is definitely a part of the Islamic spirit and the spirit of Ramadan in particular. So there's a lot going on. Milia probably knows of 100 other activities that are taking place.
Thank you for that. And, do put in the group chat, if you would, that app link, if you don't mind. I think I'm really interested to see that. So yeah, Milia.
I think, you're right. I mean, adding on to what Jihad said, there's so many things. And I think some of the things that I find particularly interesting within this context of COVID, that goes just beyond the natural call and the natural duty for Muslims and really people of faith, to be of help to one another and things like that, is, within where I am, and this is also around all of Southern California and even the country, a few things. There's this beautiful article, and I'll send it via, if I can't do it in chat, but through our email to all the participants, but how in Manhattan, all the Muslim communities every night are feeding the homeless, right? Particularly during the month of Ramadan, because it's really a time when you really do understand what someone who doesn't have access to food, who doesn't have access to water, what they're going through on a daily basis. And it's also just a really big need right now, particularly because you see an increase in homelessness, you see people who don't have food right now, and to reach out and to fulfill that gap. Locally, the Corona Masjid, which is funny that the city of Corona, right? But the Corona Islamic Center, they have this really great program called the drive-through iftar. Iftar essentially means the food that you eat when you're breaking the fast. And what I love about it is, so the community gets together and they put together these food packages, right? And they have it set on a table. And then there's people from the mosque. And it's not just for Muslims. It's for anyone who needs food right now. Because the truth of this, the reality is there's a great many people out there who've lost their jobs, who don't have that income anymore, who don't have access to funds, who don't have access to feed their children. And it's just profoundly beautiful, because then you have all of the community, and every night they have hundreds and hundreds of people come. And what's really amazing is, the community themselves, we're donating more and more so they can continue to provide that service. So one of the things we always talk about within this COVID era is that we really see this sense of altruism, and that the fact that we're all interconnected, that we're in this together. And I think it's just really beautiful how faith communities also are demonstrating that. And I think particularly during Ramadan, the extra outreach that people are doing. And it's not just one way, right? We also are very fortunate that the community around us is recognizing that, hey, Muslims are going through this month, and it's a very different way that they're going through it this year versus other years. So you saw this in Minnesota, you saw this obviously in other countries too, but where you have at the Islamic centers for the first time in my lifetime, at least within America, where you have the call to prayer, the adhan, actually played in the loudspeaker from the mosque. And this actually happens in my backyard in Claremont, in the Islamic Center of Claremont, where every day when the sun sets, and when the sun sets, that's also the time for our evening prayer, which also indicates that we eat and then we pray. So that call to prayer is at that time. For me, when I first heard that, I was amazed. I was like, wow, that's amazing, because particularly after post 9/11 America, things like that, I think people just thought it's never going to happen, right? It's just impossible. But the mere fact that that is happening, and when they were asked, like, why did this thing get out? Why was this allowed to happen? Some of the reasons that included were, well, there are people, the Muslims, they're not able to go to the mosques anymore. There might be elderly in the home who don't know when the breaking of the fast is, who may not be as advanced in technology to where they can look at their app, or they have the adhan app on the phone and the phone says the adhan. So this allows for the whole community to understand and recognize that you have this group of people who are devoting themselves to this sacred month, and we're just trying to help them to do that within the parameters or within the circumstance that we're in right now. So for me, I think those are also just really beautiful examples of how the Muslim community is giving back at this time, but also the community in which we live in are also giving to us. And I think that's just a really beautiful example.
Thank you.
I wanted to, if I could, there was one thing that it's not related to any of the questions yet, but before you open it up, there was one thing that I thought also might be relevant to this conversation, and that is some of the things that we're doing within the home. Milia touched upon the fact that her son was leading the prayer for her family,
My niece.
but yes. So, but also in our family, we have two young daughters. One just turned 12 on Wednesday, and the other one is about to turn 10. And we have two older boys. But my wife, we're all home. My oldest is home from college, and my other's in high school. We're all home for the first time, and I'm usually traveling during Ramadan. So this is very, really a special, a blessing out of the hardship, I would say, that we're able to spend it together. But one of the things that my wife did to create a special feeling about the month is she created an Advent calendar, which I'm sure you're familiar with, at least in the Christian tradition, but it's an Advent for Eid. So it's a Ramadan calendar, and each calendar day she created a pouch that hangs on this chart, and within the pouch there's either a prize or a present or a conversation topic, usually conversation topic plus something else, a scavenger hunt. And every night we talk about, an idea. What is compassion? What is mercy? What is love? What does it mean to forgive someone? Et cetera, et cetera. And everyone's participating, and it's great because we have these semi-facilitated conversations or structured conversations that allow everyone to really bond and get to know one another, and to realize the beautiful time that this is in the sacred month. So
what an amazing idea that is. That is so, I don't know, creative, and I think I'm going to try something like that.
awesome.
It even goes beyond that. Jihad, have you seen that? And I'll put some links, pictures where families create a little mosque in the house, right? With the dome and that, and have a little tent, and, make it very spiritual in the sense that, there's calligraphy in there, and there's, dim lighting, and, and they'll congregate in that tent to pray. And, significance being that that's our mosque at home. So I thought we tried to do that in our house, but my little 15-month-old destroyed it. So she wasn't interested in having a mosque. She liked actually ripping it, the paper and stuff. It didn't work too well for me, but we definitely see it in other homes, and I'll send some. I'll post some links about that too.
Yeah, that's great. You know, have you posted anything like that Jihad on a blog or anything public with an image of that Advent calendar for Ramadan?
I did. I posted it on my 3 social media platforms of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
So I could
So
find it pretty easily if I follow you or something.
yeah, so
Okay.
Facebook, you can just search for Jihad Turk. My Instagram, I mean my handle for Twitter is @Jihad_Turk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Reason why I ask is I'm sharing ideas with our families in the church of things that they can do, and that sounds like something that might spin their wheels on some ideas they could do with their families. So
I'll
I
post
think
my Instagram, my handle for Twitter. We can find it very easily there.
perfect. I have somebody that sent privately a chat question, and so we probably have time for just maybe a couple questions. So if you've got a question, I hope you might send it to me in chat. And I don't know if there's a lot of questions, but use the chat if you would, if you have a question. The first question that has come in is, let's see. What is your, let's see. Have you experienced any difference in response to your prayers during Ramadan versus other times? The question, have you experienced any difference in response to your prayers during Ramadan in comparison to other times?
Who's that to?
That's to anybody, either one of you.
Go ahead, Milia.
Yeah, I mean, I think prayer and religion, it's such a intimate thing. One of the things within Islam, there's these, the Quran, and then there's what's considered to be like sayings of the Prophet or traditions, hadiths, and some are very, very important. And one, which is my absolute favorite, it says, God is to the believer as, he or she sees God to be, right? So if you approach faith in that perspective, it's how you approach God, and as such, the return is that way too. I'm a firm believer in that. So I'm a big believer in the power of prayer, and particularly during Ramadan. So for me, little tangible things that kind of tell you, for me, I think, that God kind of sends these signs that, hey, I am listening, right? Something that I think all of us can relate to if we are a director or any type of leadership position within an organization at this time. Most organizations are hurting very badly financially, right? Donations aren't coming in as much. We don't have physical programs, things like that. So there's these government funding that's available. We're applying, but what's happening for SCIC particular, right? The first round of funding, we were just non-existent. We had no idea what was going on. No one responding to us. I mean, it was an insanity for like 2 weeks of filing forms and this and that. And then, so I remember as Ramadan started, that was one of my key prayers, right? That, oh God, if this is something that's good for us, then please grant the SCIC, the PPP. And for those of you, these are federal funding, that grant and this funding. And I kid you not, it was 2 days later that we heard that we got it, right? So I think there is, for me, I am a firm believer in answered prayers. It doesn't always happen the way that you think it does. But for me, during this Ramadan, that was something that was very tangible, because we were, for those board members of SCAC that are on this call, we were very concerned in that regards, because it was something that we really significantly needed, and we weren't hearing back, and all this stuff. So, so for me, that was a really tangible experience of an answered prayer during this blessed month. Jihad, I don't know about you.
Yeah. Jihad, do you want to, I'll tell you this. How about this? We'll roll the dice on this one. Do you want to either answer this question or the other question that's come in?
Let's do the next question. The only thing I was going to say is Milia's prayer was really powerful, because the graduate school that I head up also received PPP. So thank you, Milia, for that supplication. It spilled over to our institution as well.
Well, and it's interesting, because, within the faith, it says that indeed, when you pray for other people, the angels say that same prayer for you, right? And so that's think about, I mean, it's fascinating because it just goes to show it's never just about you. So you're absolutely right. You know, when I was praying, it wasn't just, I know people who are, you know, we're all colleagues. And so it's fascinating. So keeping one another in our prayers is such a powerful thing.
So the other question that's come in is, what is your happiest memory of Ramadan during your life?
Oh, wow.
Well, I have just I mean, the first thing that popped in my head. So I'm almost 50, and when I was fasting during my early days, this was, you know, Ramadan migrates around the calendar, so it was actually, you know, summer, or it was, you know, it was actually springtime when I was in high school and I was playing football, but it was the spring training. So we were wearing helmets and shoulder pads. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. We have, you know, temperatures in the 120s regularly. So, you know, it was extremely hot, and I was fasting. I mean, I've been fasting in Arizona since I was 7. So, you know, I was like, I'm not gonna not fast just because of football, and I'm not gonna not play football because I like football. So I was fasting and doing all the drills, and it was a lot of conditioning. It wasn't just, you know, skills. It was, you know, running, and man, I will never forget the gratitude just for the taste of water. I mean, just for having that quenching of one's thirst. It brought me such joy, and I just remember uh, experiencing such gratitude for the simple blessing of water. And you know, that I mean, it's just, you know, the prophet said when the faster has 2 moments of joy. One is when they break their fast with whatever sustenance or food, etc., and the other one hopefully will be in the hereafter. So
Yeah. You know, mine, my goodness, there's about 7 or so years ago, my parents, they got into a very bad car accident. Literally, I think it was about 4 days before Ramadan, 4 or 5 days, head-on collision. Both of them, my mother was airlifted, my father was taken. His legs went through the backs of his hips. I mean, it was horrendous, you know, and but they were alive. And I remember it happened on that Thursday, and I caught the flight out that night or early Friday morning. And I walked into, and no child should ever have to see both their parents just trying to survive in an ICU. But what was amazing is then the month of Ramadan came, and I think that for me, that Ramadan, that was life-saving, literally, because it allowed us to just, you know, live through that whole. My parents ended up being in the hospital for over 5 months, and then you know, after that, rehab hospital. And so, you know, when they came back home, they were both in wheelchairs and they had to learn how to walk and things like that. But the mere fact, I think for me, that entire Ramadan, as you know, as horrific as the case that it was, that they were involved in such a bad accident, but the mere fact that they survived, and every day they were getting better and better, and, you know, thriving, to me, in many ways, that's one of my favorite memories of Ramadan, you know, just that, because it just I don't think that I could have survived that first initial month if it wasn't for Ramadan, because I knew it was a sacred time. I knew it was a time in which it was, you know, considered to be such a spiritual month. And my God, we utilized it as much as we could, you know, with prayers and things like that. So I think for me, that was really, you know, for me, that was something that was really, really, it's bittersweet, right? Because it's a horrible situation to go through. But at the same time, I think the reason that I'm able to go through it without having some sort of PTSD is because of the fact that that initial month of Ramadan helped us to continue and, you know, start that journey really to survival.
Thank you both. This has been a really, really great afternoon, and really inspiring. Um, I have somebody that's asking who our board members are. So as we do our final wrap up here, James Barrett, um, do you want to just say a quick hello and unmute yourself and say what congregation you represent?
Yeah, my name is Jim Barrett, and South Coast area, Manhattan Beach, Torrance, Redondo, Palos Verdes. And I really enjoyed today's program. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And I know Patty Heckman is on the call. Patty, are you able to say hello, or otherwise, maybe Milia can share a little bit about, oh, there's Patty.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jonas. I'm Patty Heckman. I'm with the South Coast Interfaith Council now for over 10 years. I'm the current treasurer, and I'm also a lay leader in the Soka Gakkai International Buddhist Faith. We have a community center here in Long Beach that I practice with. That's the SGI Buddhist Faith. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else on the board that's on this call?
Marietta. Well, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, Marietta. Marietta, would you?
Well, I'm with the Rolling Hills United Methodist Church and served in all kinds of capacities over there. I've been there probably 32 years and happy to be on the council for about a year and a half, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Marietta. And I'm Jonas Hayes. I'm a board member as well. And anyway, it's been a great afternoon. Do you want to say, Milia, any final announcements about any other future programs coming up, or how folks can, contribute to this mission of the organization?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, Jihad, for being here and on this session with us. I really appreciate you taking the time to do so. And of course, Jonas and Marietta and Cheryl for doing all the behind the scenes and making sure everything goes well every week. In terms of the upcoming programs, we do have another one next week, and I believe it is with actually Catholic, we have the, oh, perfect, there we go. Holistic care within the hospital community, and it's with Dr. Reverend Mark, I think it's Sisson, is how he says his name, who's the senior Catholic priest chaplain at Providence St. Joseph Medical Center. And he'll really talk about, the role of a chaplain within the context of the pandemic that we're going through. So we hope that you'll join us for that. Similarly, we hope that, like I said, a lot of our funding has depleted because of the situation that we find ourselves in. So we also hope that you'll be able to support our work. If you go to our website, there's a donate button. And if you're able to, we'd be grateful for anything that you can donate. Other than that, I think those are the two major announcements for next week. So thank you for this opportunity also for me to speak about Ramadan. And if you guys have any other questions, just, send us an email and we'll try our best to answer them.
I'll just have one more thing. And I know, Jihad, this wasn't something that we talked about in advance, but I'm just going to try to put you on the spot anyway here. Would you offer kind of a final blessing, of kind of a final prayer for us all to kind of close out our time together?
Sure. I'm going to recite a verse from the Quran, which is in the Arabic, which follows the verse in the Quran. There's only one that talks about the month of Ramadan. And it's not the verse about Ramadan, it's the verse that follows. So there's a context for it. So let us pray. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب أجيب دعوة الداع إذا دعان فليستجيبوا لي وليؤمنوا بي لعلهم يرشدون. And if my servants, God is saying, and if my servants ask you about me, I am close. I answer the supplication of anyone who supplicates whenever they supplicate. So let them answer my call and believe in me so that perhaps they may be rightly guided. So let us on this gathering separate as we joined in God's name and ask that he give us rightly guidance so that we can not only conduct ourselves in a way that's most beautiful and pleasing to God, but is in service of one another.
Amen.
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 Thank you all so much. Join us next Friday afternoon at 3:00. And thank you very much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jihad.